Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Morton Blackwell, president of the Leadership Institute, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to this, our May Wednesday Wake Up Club breakfast. We live in interesting times. Washington Times this morning reports that the Republicans in the Senate are considering what is described as the nuclear option for getting votes on presidential nominees to the courts. And it is a very interesting thing which is not explained at all in the Post this morning, and not explained well in the Washington Times, and I thought I might share with you the process, just because I know judicial appointments are very important to conservatives. The strategy, which as far as I know was engendered by Senator Jim Talent of Missouri, and he and I discussed this on last Thursday, is as follows. The next time there is a cloture vote on a Bush judicial nominee and 60 votes are not obtained, a senator would rise and make a point of order that the filibuster rule cannot, under the Constitution, apply to items on the executive calendar, meaning confirmation matters, but could apply constitutionally on the legislative calendar, which applies to proposed legislation. And that, therefore, under the Constitution, 51 votes are all that are required to shut off debate. The chair, the president of the Senate, who presumably would be the vice president at that moment, notwithstanding whatever the parliamentarian might say, would then rule in favor of the point of order, at which point there would be an appeal to the ruling of the chair, presumably by somebody who opposed this nomination, and then the Senate would vote on whether or not to sustain the ruling of the chair, which takes 51 votes. So that's the process that's being proposed. Well, it does have a certain charm to it, but we have to remember the other element of this. One of the geniuses of our Constitution, definitely intended by the founders, was to make it very difficult for the government to do things. And facilitating legislation was not any part of the founders' plans. They wanted to make it difficult to pass laws. And once this thing is done, it would then eliminate conservatives' ability in some future scenario to prevent action in the Senate. So it would cut both ways. It's not a matter, if it should happen, which should be of unalloyed joy for conservatives, but particularly if it comes to a Supreme Court justice nominee or two, it might be considered that the game was worth the candle. We shall see. In 2003 to date, the Leadership Institute has trained 1,347 students in 63 schools. We placed 19 job seekers through our free employment placement program. And you have in front of you our 2003 school schedule, and I'd urge you to take a moment to review that calendar and consider attending one of our programs this year, or suggesting one of our programs to someone who would be appropriate to attend them. And now I'm going to introduce to you Sarah Weiler, who will offer an invocation and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Sarah Weiler is a Virginia native who came to us by way of the American Association of Christian Schools. As a high school student, she attended one of the annual conferences that the Leadership Institute hosts here. I don't know if that was the one, Sarah, where one of those gals brought a guitar and had a bumper sticker on the guitar case which said, what did it say? I thought it was very clever, and now can I remember it? Something like conservative, single, and looking for the right man is what this high school gal had on her bumper. That wasn't your group?
No,
that wasn't your group. Maybe it was Teen Pact that came in to do it. It was a high school group. With her newfound love for politics, she spent the next 4 years studying political science at Grove City College in Grove City, Pennsylvania, one of the nation's well-known and importantly independent conservative colleges. She rounded out her education with summer internships with Representative Joe Pitts of Pennsylvania, a very solid fellow, and National Pro-Life Alliance, the Center for Individual Rights, and temporary employment here at LI as school's assistant. Beyond that, this extraordinary young lady spent a semester studying the British political system in London, and she graduated last May from Grove City, and she promptly returned to the Leadership Institute as our new facilities manager. In that position, she manages this floor and the dormitories, rents out our training center to other conservative groups, and handles event planning. Sarah.
Will you stand with me as I pray? Heavenly Father, your mercies are new every morning. Thank you for life and breath today, and thank you for the air that fills our lungs and the world around us that declares your glory. Lord, you are the God of wonders. Please grant us eyes that truly see and ears that truly hear. You promise us in your word that you will guide the humble and teach them your ways. Father, we often lack humility, but you are gracious. Give us humility, guide our actions, our thoughts, and our motivations. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. I ask this in the precious name of Jesus Christ, your Son. Amen. We'll do a pledge now. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And now for an overall update of the Center for Print and Broadcast Media, I'm going to introduce to you Dan Labert. Dan works to train conservatives to be more effective on television, as well as runs the day-to-day operations of the Leadership Institute's Center for Print and Broadcast Media, where Dan is the executive director. Since joining the Leadership Institute in 1988, where Dan got his start as National Field Director for the campus leadership program, and in that period, by the way, the number of active CLP groups more than doubled, and membership grew proportionately. In 2001, he took the CLP activism across the Atlantic to Europe, where he organized and directed an international event that advocated the United States position on global warming in conjunction with the Bush White House administration. And at that point, when they were organizing in Germany the pro-America rally, a German policeman came over and said to them, he said, you know, we've seen many American student protesters over here and student demonstrators, but this is the first time we have ever seen American students over here demonstrating in favor of America, which is pretty interesting. He's a graduate of Penn State. He has degrees in both political science and in public relations, with minors in Italian and legal studies. Before transferring to Penn State, Dan attended the University of Buffalo on a full athletic scholarship. His biggest collegiate accomplishment was being named a 1995 All-American in football. Dan was born into politics. His entire family is active, and he has successfully managed all their campaigns, including his mother's 1996 race for city council. His past experience includes serving as Special Assistant to the President at the Institute for Justice, as well as being part of the Operations Department for the Buffalo Bills. Dan?
Thank you very much, Morton. One of the things I've learned since joining the Leadership Institute is something very simple: leadership. But leadership isn't about being the best at what you do. It's about making everyone else the best at what they do. And at the Center for Print and Broadcast Media, we believe we are accomplishing just that. In our Effective Television Techniques Workshop, or ETW for short, we are training conservatives how to win on television. How many times have you tuned into Dan Rather from CBS or Peter Jennings of ABC and watched the liberals control the conversation, completely run the tables, using the conservative as a doormat? Well, no more. In just the past 4 months of this year, we have trained more than 115 conservatives to be more effective on camera and deliver their message, our message. From working with wonderful organizations like the one you'll hear from today, the American Legislative Exchange Council, we've been also given the opportunity to train various conservative state legislators from around the country. Also in that 115 conservatives are 10 members of the United States House of Representatives, all who received our training. Whether you're in front of the camera or behind, training and practice are keys to success. The Effective Television Techniques Workshop at the Center for Print and Broadcast Media gives you both. If you would like to attend an ETW and see for yourself, I encourage you to check the calendar and register as soon as possible. We live in an age where irresponsible or inaccurate journalism has no consequences. We can call the networks and the news stations and complain all we want, but when you're dealing with people who think of Bill Clinton as the great communicator, our suggestions fall on deaf ears. The only way to balance the media is to train conservatives for news-related positions. Enter our broadcast journalism school. This seminar gives students the basic nuts and bolts for success in the broadcast journalism industry. In just the 2 schools we've conducted this year, more than 30 conservatives are given that opportunity and now are on their way. If you know of anyone who wants a career in broadcast journalism, please contact the Institute. Let us know who they are, and we will get in touch with them. And finally, the award-winning Sacker Multimedia Center. The SMMC is Northern Virginia's leading broadcast quality video production center. Whether you're in the market for a studio taping, press conference coverage, edit facilities, the Sacker Multimedia Center has what you need. I encourage all of you to tour our facilities at the conclusion of the breakfast, and if you have a project in mind, let us know. We'd also be more than happy to display some samples of our work. The staff of CPBM is some of the best and brightest. They continue to make my job very easy every day. That's the update for the Center for Print and Broadcast Media. Have a great day. Thank you very much.
Mike always has to come down after football All-Americans. And now, to introduce our speaker, I'm going to present to you our Vice President for Programs, Lou Barnett. Lou is the former National Political Director of Citizens for the Republic, the PAC founded by Ronald Reagan, which was for many years by far the largest conservative PAC in the country. He was also political director before that of the American Conservative Union and a past treasurer of the Young Republican National Federation when it was really a big deal. Mr. Barnett is co-founder of the American Legislative Exchange Council, an organization of conservative legislators, and he will introduce our distinguished featured speaker.
Thank you, Morton. There was a little inside joke there in that Morton was in the YRs at the same time I was. So it was really a big deal when Morton was involved in the YRs. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the introduction, Morton. Our morning speaker today is a very unique American and one of the most important speakers that we will have this year in this program of Wednesday wake-up breakfasts. The executive director of the American Legislative Exchange Council is basically the guy who makes the organization work, helps to put the committees together, smooth over ruffled feelings of egos, chart a course for policy for the organization. And without this position being properly filled, the organization would meander, flounder, not move as effectively and efficiently as it does. ALEC is the largest individual membership organization of any of the state legislative associations in the country. And if you're familiar with the tragedy of the commons economic argument, states pay for the memberships of their legislators in most of these other organizations. This is the only organization where 2,400 individual state legislators have put their own money on the line for dues to join and participate in the organization. Besides the state legislative members, there are 98 former ALEC members sitting in the United States Congress today, and 3 members of Bush's cabinet are former members of ALEC. It has been said that the states are the laboratories of our republic. This is only true if something is happening in the test tubes. Otherwise, it's simply at times in the past, the states have in fact been a carbon copy, maybe a pale carbon copy of what was happening in Washington. ALEC has made that comparison true. Now, it is also said that we, all of us, are made in God's image and likeness. When you look at members of the state legislatures, it is often hard to see the image and likeness among people who dissemble at the drop of a hat, whose commitments are as ephemeral as a mist in the morning. ALEC, however, is different. There is a bill in Congress to provide $30 billion, not an insignificant amount of money by anybody's estimation, in bailout money to the states. ALEC has taken the position that the bailout will hurt economic recovery. Colorado adopted a voucher program. ALEC applauded the adoption by Colorado of vouchers. More Americans are avoiding jury duty, according to an ALEC study. But they didn't just sit back and criticize a phenomena. They put forward the Jury Patriotism Act, making jury service more appealing and rewarding to citizens. Another report says the latest budget figures look grim. There are over $95 billion in deficits among all the states in the nation. And ALEC's answer to that was not just to cast that stone, but to promote reports like, "Show me the money," budget-cutting strategies for cash-strapped states. The state factor: states can't tax their way back to prosperity. Parenthetically, I might note that's a new idea for some people. Crisis in state spending: a guide for state legislatures. So, going back to my observation that it is said we are made in God's image and likeness, there are some people who are closer to that than others. And I would like to introduce Duane Parde.
Well, thank you, Lou. It's a pleasure to be here this morning, and I appreciate everyone coming here. We have got a very good working relationship with the Leadership Institute, and it's a pleasure to work with the fine people that are here. I've enjoyed getting to know Morton the last 3 years and his leadership in the conservative movement. And Lou Barnett, I would not be here this morning, and ALEC would not be nationwide in the 50 states if Lou had not gotten together in 1973 with some other forward-looking people to start the American Legislative Exchange Council. And it's a pleasure to be the executive director of this organization and to work with state lawmakers across the country that are out there every day trying to make a difference in limiting the size of government and improving the lives of working families all across this nation. And increasingly, through I think some of our educational programs and working with the Leadership Institute on media training and message development, a lot of our members are now running for higher office. As Lou mentioned, 98 are now serving in Congress. Congressman Joe Pitts is a former ALEC member, so I was glad to hear about that earlier. And we're working with them to coordinate some state-federal programs. Lou mentioned the federal bailout, something that we're very involved in right now as well, and we'll continue to pursue that, and then also work with this administration on state-federal programs. What I'd like to do today is just kind of give you a little more background on ALEC, and then talk about some of our major programs, what is happening in the states from a free market perspective. There is good news. We certainly hear a lot about budget deficits. That is a problem, but I think we've made some good progress in many areas, and then some, I think, important steps in the areas of tort reform, education reform, and some other key initiatives that I think you're interested in. I don't know if you can see it, but we were started in 1973, as was mentioned, by a Democrat and Republican state lawmakers. We are a bipartisan organization. Our membership, the breakdown is about 80-20 Republican, 2 Democrat, and just over 2,400 members in all 50 states, which is, we are an individual membership organization. We do not receive taxpayer funds in any way. We're completely privately funded. And that 2,400 number, that represents about 30% of all the state legislators in America. And we're active in all 50 states. The mission of ALEC is to promote the Jeffersonian principles of limited government, free enterprise, and individual liberty. And so all of our programs, from developing model legislation for our members to use in their states, to our conferences, to our seminars, it's all geared to promote those ideas, put them into action, actually legislative language, which our members can use in their state capitals. One thing that we've added in the last, I guess, about 2.5, 3 years now is the media training that we've been working closely with the Leadership Institute on, holding seminars across the country for our members. And they've been very well received, and I think has helped us kind of move the ball forward. Our presence, ALEC members, as the organization has grown over the last 30 years, our members have increasingly taken legislative leadership roles in their state capitals. And I just have a breakdown here of what I think is 36 speakers across the country, or Speaker Pro Tems, 25 Senate presidents, 31 Senate majority or minority leaders, and 33 House majority or minority leaders. And this is really key because these are the people that set the legislative agendas in the states. Here in Virginia, Speaker Bill Howell has been an active member of ALEC for many years, and to see him now as Speaker of the House in Richmond, he really sets the legislative calendar, has a big impact on what happens in the legislature, and the same holds across the country. Colorado, another example, the Senate President out there, John Andrews, who many of you may know, he's played a key role in that state this year in fighting for school vouchers and fighting against tax increases, working with Governor Owens in Colorado. And then dozens of committee chairs across the country. We talked a little bit earlier about some of our alumni members that are in Congress. Speaker Dennis Hastert is a former member, Tom DeLay, and then Congressman Henry Hyde was a founding member of ALEC when he served in the Illinois House of Representatives. 7 sitting governors, I mentioned just a couple, Bill Owens in Colorado, Governor Rowland up in Connecticut, were former members of the organization. And then the cabinet secretaries, Secretary Rumsfeld was a private sector when he served on our board of directors as a private sector member. Tommy Thompson was a former member, and then Andy Card when he served in the Massachusetts legislature. I like to joke he was probably one of 3 conservatives in Massachusetts at the time, but we had him. He was a member of ALEC, so that's what counts. And a reason a Wall Street Journal clip why we think that what ALEC members are doing is important is that the slow pace of change here in the Washington area, more and more decisions, important decisions, are being made in the state capitals, as they should be, and so our members are playing I think a very important role in the setting the kind of the tone of government for our nation. Some of the success of what our members have been doing in the states: we have 9 policy task forces that are divided up on issue lines: education, transportation, tax, much like what you would see at the state level, state capitals. Well, we draft our members from across the country that sit on these committees. We draft model legislation to provide free market conservative solutions to public policy problems, so that you don't just complain about the state of education or roads or crime. We look for answers, and our members try to move that ball forward. And a key part of that is our model legislation. Last year, during the legislative sessions, ALEC members across the country introduced over 1,000 model bills that have been drafted and published by ALEC. And over 200 of these were enacted into law, and I just have a few examples of some of the key, more popular key models. The Private Attorney Retention Act, that is geared at basically putting the brakes on some of the attorneys general across the country, their ability to hire their former law partners to go out and sue corporations, as we've seen really a troubling growth in that area. And the Charter Schools Act, there on the bottom, a key effort in the education reform movement, along now with vouchers. This year, we published a new compendium of some of our best, newest ideas for model legislation. We're calling that our Agenda for Liberty. And the book, again, is something we're promoting with our members to get good free market ideas out in the country. As I talked about earlier, our members being in leadership positions, committee chairs, in the majority now in many states, their ability to move these model bills, the model legislation, is greatly improved. We're seeing a lot more success at the state level, both in promoting the free market ideas, but stopping onerous legislation. The Agenda for Liberty is divided up into, let me go back. Several different sections: tax and fiscal policy, education, civil justice, and Medicaid. Medicaid is the single fastest growing expense area in state budgets, and something that if we don't get a handle on it with good market-oriented reforms, is going to completely wipe out state revenues by, over the next 10 years or so. We talked about the budget deficits. This is something that's being widely reported. The states are in the worst fiscal crisis since World War II. Been working on some of these issues for a number of years. In the 90s, we had a period where states were facing severe budget deficits, but this is by far the worst. Combined deficits approaching $100 billion, but that's growing right now. Few states have started to get things under control, but the two largest states, California and New York, are in terrible shape. California, last count, I think it was just over $31.5 billion. That's growing hundreds of millions of dollars every day. The state isn't expected to even start working on their budget until probably July or August. They're routinely late in getting that done. And there are tremendous implications for this. If they have to start raising taxes, New York, California, for example, it will certainly have an impact on the national economy as we slowly start to grow out of the recession, and mitigate any tax cuts that we could get at the federal level. The primary reason I just wanted to show this clip for the state budget deficits is the fiscal irresponsibility, really, over the last several years at the state level. We started to work on this strongly in 2001. We published a variety of studies showing the crisis in state spending, and then started again to work on solutions, not just point to the problem, but try to offer some common sense, proven strategies for states to use, for our members to use. And we published a report, Show Me the Money, budget cutting strategies for cash-strapped states. This has been widely used, and it's been received very well on a bipartisan basis, I have to add, in Michigan, Kansas, and several other states. And it's a report that just shows, established commissions get rid of waste, fraud, and abuse. As I've talked with Lou about several times, kind of a base closing type commission approach on some things for states, and ways to find efficiencies. Our members enjoy working with their colleagues across state lines because they get to learn what works and what doesn't work. And ALEC, we try to promote that sort of an exchange, and the report is geared toward that. We mentioned the federal bailout, something that we're very concerned about. I know there's been some legislation introduced, anywhere from $30 to $60 billion from the feds to the state governments. We're working closely with our alumni members on this issue. We're opposed to it. We think that it would take the pressure off. Well, it would do a couple of things that we're concerned about. One, it would ease the pressure on states to make the types of reforms that would cut spending and improve services in many areas. But it would also, of course, make the federal budget deficit worse as well. So something that we're concerned about, and we'll be working to either defeat or modify substantially. we commissioned a little cartoon that we've been running in some of our publications, and sometimes humor is the best way to get a message across. Some of our other priorities, education obviously is arguably the most important issue that state governments deal with. The Supreme Court case last summer, the Cleveland voucher program was really what was needed to kind of get the voucher movement going in earnest in the state capitals, when the Supreme Court kind of cleared away that constitutional cloud, and now state legislators are really moving this effort forward. Colorado was the first. We're going to see either vouchers or tax credits. Each state's a little bit different, but we're seeing progress in Missouri, Texas, and I think several other states before the sessions wrap up. Civil justice reform, something we've had a major project on the last 3 years. Again, trying to get a handle on the lawsuit abuse, which has wrecked our economy and poured millions and billions of dollars into liberal campaign and efforts across the country that we'll see certainly a lot of next year. Our members in Mississippi really took the lead in that state. It was really the kind of the tort reform capital of the world, and our members, we worked with them, and they introduced a whole series of tort reform measures. They had a special session last summer and fall, and really took the lead in passing some much needed changes there, and kind of gave momentum to other states that have similar problems, maybe in Alabama and a few others, to go ahead and take the lead and get a handle on the tort reform effort. There's just over 75 of our bills were introduced in the sessions last year. Just a couple of them including in the Private Attorney Retention Act. I think it's been adopted in about 5 states, including here in Virginia was one of them. Appeal bond waiver. This is something that you've read about probably recently in Illinois in the Philip Morris case, but there are others where for a company to appeal a verdict, I mean, they have to post a bond that's 150% of what the judgment is. Well, they can't do that when judgments are coming down in the tens of billions of dollars. Nobody can afford that. So it's really a kind of a constitutional protection issue. And so this is it's maybe not the most sexy issue in the world, but it's very, very important to kind of get our civil justice system back on track. And the Class Action Improvement Act to try and bring some common sense into the way class action lawsuits are filed across the country. Mississippi again, I think, passed this reform effort, and it's a key to what they're doing in that state. This has all been done under our Disorder in the Court project, which is now in its 3rd year. Medicaid reform, a huge problem. Easily bankrupt the states by 2020 if really critical changes aren't made soon. It's the fastest growing item in the state budget across the country, and is probably the leading culprit in the deficit situation right now. We're very active in putting patients first, which is kind of the tagline for our Medicaid reform project. And just a final thought, I'm a fan of PJ O'Rourke and on the free market. It's something that we're very proud of. I know that you are, and the everything that the Leadership Institute does as well. But something that really drives and stands at the center of everything that we do. And I think PJ's had a nice quote here comparing, in a humorous way, the value of free market system. And later this year, we're going to be having our 30th annual meeting, and we're here in Washington, D.C. It's July 30th through August 2nd. We're at the Marriott Wardman Park, and we'll have probably around 1,000 or more legislators from across the country here. We're working on a program now to put that together, and it's our largest event every year, and we focus on issues and things, try to help our members prepare for the sessions and their work later in the year. We do 2 national conferences, the annual meeting being the largest, and then we have a conference in December for newly elected or first term state lawmakers, and then a variety of state issue briefings across the country every year. But if you're interested in attending the conference, you can go to our website and register there to attend. We'd certainly like to have as many people as possible attend the conference. I think it's something you would enjoy, and meeting ALEC members from across the country. And I know we'll be doing our media training and other activities with Leadership Institute again this year. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak this morning, and appreciate you being here, and want to thank Lou and Morton for all the good work that the Leadership Institute is doing. Thank you.
Duane is up for some questions, so hands are in the air.
Stephen Moore, president of the Club for Growth, had an op-ed piece this week proposing, or noting that lawyers had earned as much as $50,000 an hour on the tobacco settlements on cases that never even went to court, and proposing that the rule of reasonable compensation be applied by lawsuits from the states, and that as a result, as much as $9 billion could be transferred out of the pockets of the most super liberal activist group in the country to the states. Are you actively pursuing that?
Well, that's kind of a key part of our Attorney General, our Private Attorney Sunshine Act, is to shed light, A, on those practices, B, to provide some legislative oversight for the AGs and who they hire and how much they pay. And again, the whole idea is just put this out in the open and have some sensible oversight by both the legislature and the public on that. With regard to the kind of the return of the fees, we haven't endorsed that, but we work closely with Steve, and I think that's something that ought to be seriously looked at. It was an outrage what happened with the tobacco lawsuits, regardless of how you feel about tobacco, but the amount of the billions and billions of dollars that the trial bar collected for nothing, and the sweetheart deals that were given by some of the AGs to their former law partners, campaign contributors, is an outrage. It's a complete outrage. So I think maybe Steve is on to a good point there. Yes, sir.
Is the Medicaid growth, is that derived largely to state level government, with aliens and people who get walk in or seeking treatment?
A large part of it is caused by expansion of benefits and eligibility, and that is a part of it. The question was on Medicaid, what's driving the costs of that, and over the years they keep adding on the number of people that are eligible, and they keep adding on number of benefits. Well, that costs money, obviously, and that's a key driving issue. And then you have no real market forces at play in terms of competition, in terms of responsibility to the consumer as well. So until you build that in, And it's like any other government program, it's just gonna run amok. Yes, sir.
There's a little blurb in the Washington Times this morning that the Speaker of the Michigan House has ordered members to take a pay cut in order to help the state budget deficit. But the President of the Michigan Senate says he's going to leave it up to individual senators whether they want to take a pay cut. I'm just curious, are the head of the Speaker of the Michigan House and the head of the Michigan Senate, are they ALEC members by any chance?
Well, the Senate president is, and we'll be in touch with him after. I didn't catch that article. And I read the time, but I missed that one. So thanks for pointing it out. But no, I think the legislature in these times needs to take a leadership role, and I think that's something they ought to do. I'm not going to. These I think that could help people kind of address this issue better. Yes, sir.
There have been a lot of complaints over the years about unfunded mandates from the federal government to the states. Do you have any kind of statistics, numbers on what that's costing, those things are costing the states, in particular in the context of the present budget deficits?
Well, we don't think it's as much as what the National Governors Association and the National Conference of State Legislatures has been purporting. Now, there is, Mike, any idea on any numbers?
Legitimately, I don't know. One thing to keep in mind is that all those programs are optional. The states don't have to do it.
Yeah.
They just, to get the money, they have to do these things. So the states, it's kind of their favorite parlor game, to take the money and then complain about the unfunded mandate. They have options not to do that.
Yeah, and what they're talking about now, the main are Homeland Security and the No Child Left Behind Act. Those are the two programs that they're pointing to the most. Well, those are recently enacted programs, and those two things did not cause the state budget deficits right now. But I think in terms of the states, these programs are in some degree optional, and states have some flexibility in the way they manage those programs. On Medicaid, for example, the Department of Health and Human Services has almost been begging states to apply for waivers the last 2 years so they can significantly modify Medicaid programs. A few states have taken them up on that, but not as much as what I know Secretary Thompson would like. And I think the state-federal relationship always gets a little contentious in some of these areas, but I think the state problems, in our view, are largely of their own making, and not they can't blame Congress or the president. Yes.
Duane, with all the problems that the states are having financially and all the convulsion in the state legislatures, would you give us an estimate on what effect this might have on state legislative elections this year and next?
I think if the states raise taxes, I think it will have a significant impact on the election results next year. This year we just have a handful of states that have state elections, legislative elections. But I think the polls, both nationally and in any statewide polls, show that the American people don't want a tax increase. You see that reflected in President Bush's approval rating at the national level. You look at the state level, probably the most unpopular elected official in this country right now is Gray Davis in California. His approval ratings are almost, you can't even find them. I think it was like 27%, and that's falling. And that's falling. And I think for Republicans, for conservatives, to vote for any significant tax increase, certainly in the income tax or massive broad-based sales tax, I think would be a huge mistake. Those states that are working now to cut spending, to cut programs, the people are supporting that, and the polls are showing that. And the battle's not over by any means, but when we started this year, I thought that we would see a lot more tax increases than we've seen, and I'm pleased, not completely, but about how little taxes have actually been increased outside of the, tobacco and the quote-unquote sin taxes. Efforts to raise income taxes, sales taxes, property taxes have not succeeded and haven't really been seriously proposed so far, anyway. Yes, sir.
I took a conference about a year ago on tax increases by way of anti-tobacco legislation, $250 billion and so on. And the gist of the presentations got to the point of tax increases are totally verboten basically inside the legislatures. And so the government, as well as the national, they have moved into an incestuous relationship with private sector attorneys to go and sue on the basis of the government, say, for tobacco. And these are really taxes. How is tort reform going to take care of this, or will it? It seems that if you have, in this city, 70,000 lawyer lobbyists, they're not going to let tort reform get through. Right? Is there a solution long-term to this?
Well, the real action on this is at the state level. I agree with your assessment on the votes simply aren't in the U.S. Senate to pass anything at the federal level. The problem you've just raised is what we've termed the taxation through litigation. You've heard that widely used, and that is a part of a real effort by AGs and by the trial bar to both line their own pockets with these judgments, but to also give money to the states. I mean, the states, it's funny, if you've followed in Illinois, the verdict that was there against, I think it was Philip Morris, but the judge, I don't know how many attorneys general signed a joint letter to the court in Illinois because they were worried that if Philip Morris went bankrupt because of that jury, that they would lose their tobacco settlement funds. So now you have this unholy alliance between state governments and the people that they were trashing and demonizing 5 years ago because they want the money. I mean, you're talking billions and billions of dollars at stake. They tried to do it with Microsoft, the Attorney General, and they've done it with other. They've looked at the gun industry. They looked at the lead paint industry. My favorite was latex gloves. We had a letter from, I think it was the Attorney General in Rhode Island, had written to his colleague in Minnesota shortly after the tobacco verdict. Master settlement agreement was reached to sue the makers of latex gloves and to do the same thing to that industry as they did to tobacco. You're seeing efforts against the fast food industry, the liquor industry, and I think the gaming industry is very much in their sights right now as well. And it's being driven by greed, and there's no other way around it. So what we've done, we've devised some model legislation, the Private Attorney, the Sunshine Act that we talked about, the Class Action Reform Act, and several other key bills that to really stop the trial bar and shed light on what some of the AGs have been doing over the last 10 years, really. And I just refer anybody to the website for the National Association of Attorneys General. NAG is what it's called. It's probably one of the best acronyms I can think of. And they have their legal strategies, or they have in the past, about what they're doing. The private meetings. If a private company operated the way the Attorneys General have operated, they would be in jail. And yet some of these attorneys general have been very active, and now you have billions of dollars that they can put into campaigns, and it's a real problem. Yes, ma'am.
In the area of education, you mentioned vouchers and charter schools.
Yes.
Are you working on any other kinds of school choice?
Yes, the tuition tax credits are one example of that, and in Missouri, for example, I think it's today or this week, there's a hearing on a tuition tax credit bill that we have people testifying on and our members are very supportive there. That works better in Missouri. It's a better option for them to go that route than in Colorado, which could get a demonstration project set up, very good program that they can build on in the future. But a voucher approach worked better into the laws of Colorado and the tax code for them. So we're very involved.
I'm interested in the one in Virginia that, they're still pushing it, but
Mhm.
it gets close, but they're
Yeah, it's a tough battle. It really is. But I think it'll work. You just need a few more states to take it. And I think Virginia, well, maybe we get a new governor in Virginia, it'll help.
Is there one more question? Okay.
Good. Thank you very
Great,
much.
thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Duane, we really appreciate what your organization is doing, and we appreciate what you personally are doing. You're a great leader for this great organization. As a little token of appreciation for your appearance here today, let me present you with an Adam Smith tie.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Warren.
Please join us on Wednesday, June 4th for our next breakfast. Our special guest will be Notra Trulock, who was former Director of Intelligence, which dealt with our nuclear business at the Department of Energy. Going to be an interesting presentation next month. And I would invite those of you who would like a tour to meet here at the podium at the conclusion of the breakfast. Rachel Nutting here, raise your hand, Rachel, will be delighted to give any of you interested in a tour, a first-class tour through our facilities. Thank you all very much.